So we're seeking a demilitarized or less militarized U.S. foreign policy
Mhm.
and a more just world, but again with the emphasis on uh, demilitarizing U.S. foreign policy, which means not using war as a tool of first resort, which is quite a popular position. Less popular is saying, well, if you actually believe that, we can't be we got to cut Pentagon funding, right? We can't be investing in war as our tool of first resort if we don't want it to be that. Um,
Well, hold on. How do we win with less military?
yeah.
How you know how do
What
we
is
win?
yeah? One of our other kind of enduring campaigns is also trying to explain the connections between America's actions overseas and how we experience life here in the US. The Trump administration has made that much easier than it used to be, but trying to explain how militarism abroad ultimately is going to come back and bite those of us living in the United States. And so that even if those of us, if you don't have moral objections to what we do to other people overseas, you need to understand that these same ideologies and tools and practices are going to get used against us here. Again, Donald Trump and his staff have made it so easy to draw that connection that I might be out of a job on making that argument. It used to be uh, a little harder. And yeah, it's ultimately the idea is right is that we can provide um, you know dignity, economic, social justice for people in the United States without having to be at war or supporting wars in dozens of countries around the world. Uh, and and it's meant to be a counterbalance to what is really the bipartisan kind of consensus for people who are powerful in the national security world in DC, which is that it's incredibly important that the United States be militarily engaged around the world at all times. And that by the way, right, is not something that's changed under Donald Trump, though he's maybe has slightly different views about which places we should be military engaged in, but it's still the same idea that the baseline position of the United States should be military intervention around the world. Right. A big part of what my organization does, right, is we engage members of Congress. We engage larger progressive or labor organizations that aren't national security focused, but can benefit from somebody advising them or organizing them on these topics.
Well, win without war, and you just said you started off being an expert on Middle East.
Yeah.
Now you're an expert on everything. So
Yeah.
let's throw out a couple of things.
I got
Um,
it. Not the expert on everything. I'm helping cover and respond to a lot of things due to the expansive nature of militarism under this administration. So I got to go on the record saying not an expert on everything.
all right. Let's see. Ukraine and Russia and the so-called peace plan. Do you have any hope, any skepticism, any, well, this isn't going to work because,
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't take this to mean my support for it, but a lot of our Ukraine policy since the Russian invasion was kind of premised on, we could say, either a very hopeful or a fantasy reading of the situation, which was that um, Putin saw this as somewhat existential, and the American electorate did not, and it's which was required to basically keep um, arming the Ukrainian army so that it could fight Russia. And it's not, depending on which circles you're in, it's not really a popular uh, reality to acknowledge. I get the sense that more Ukrainians are tired of fighting at this point.
Mhm.
And if if that's the case, I don't really think it's. I can't say it's America's place to tell them they need to keep fighting because of our understanding of kind of our own principles. So I don't think it's an ideal outcome, but I think let me say it's not the conflict is not going to end if the United States continue to not really recognize the reality of the real asymmetry in interest
Mhm.
and in power amongst the actors.
You can listen to cable news for a long time and never hear that.
I mean, I guess it's not right. It's just, I think it was quite extraordinary that we had the Russia-Ukraine war and Israel-Hamas Gaza going on at the same time.
Mhm.
And you see the different ways that American politics treated those conflicts.
Mhm.
And I think,
In American media.
yeah, and American media. And, I think if if we decided that on principle we must help Ukraine defend, every inch of its territory and fight until it's reclaimed all of that, I think I could respect that if we had an underlying principle behind that instead of, well, Ukraine's in Europe and they're white, and the Arabs in the Palestinian territories are not, and so these people we will fight and perhaps risk nuclear war for their territorial integrity, and these people we won't. And so that doesn't mean that we should never, I think, defend the victims of aggression because I don't believe that. But I think it's a tough sell. And honestly, Republicans understood this early on under Biden, right? Or some Republicans did. It's a tough sell um, to tell Americans that they need to be bearing some cost um, for this country's territorial integrity, not this one's, because it's important here, but not important there.
Yeah, because they're white and they're brown. And
Well, yeah, and for Ukraine, I mean, the narrative is all about the Russian invasion in 2022, but not the civil war that was going on for 8 years before that, where so many thousands in eastern Ukraine were killed. So,
so next topic, Venezuela.
Yeah,
yeah.
What is your opinion? What is
yeah,
Win Without War's
yeah.
opinion?
So this is a really extraordinary case where, to me, I was gonna say it's not even clear what the Trump administration wants here, though it would be wrong to describe the Trump administration as a uh, unified organism instead of maybe half a dozen people with conflicting views and priorities. So obviously, we oppose any form of military intervention in Venezuela. But it is interesting trying to see what the collective Trump administration even wants about this, because you have folks like, right, Marco Rubio, I think for just deep-seated ideological reasons, wants to see every uh, communist associated leader in Latin America overthrown. I think that's just kind of his core beliefs, and so he thinks that's a good thing in its own right. You have other actors who are certainly motivated by, well, I would think are motivated by access to their oil industry, though it's also a little confusing because uh, it's been clear that we can have access to their oil without doing regime change operation. And then you have, right, Stephen Miller, who now we know is largely behind these boat strikes, which are have been described as an attempt to open the door for full military action in Venezuela. Um, though if you're the guy whose number one issue is immigration, it's also confusing about why you would start a war that's going to obviously displace a lot of people and cause more migration and uh, and the cooperation from the Venezuelan government in receiving deported Venezuelans. So every part of this is nonsensical, and this is not even getting into the fact that, of course, we could not successfully regime change uh,
Mm-mm.
this country.
Are we committing war crimes?
So let me say no, but that's because there's no war. We're just committing crimes. And
Okay.
there's been, and I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm really encouraged by the public debate that's come up over the boat strikes, but the aspect of it where, well, it was a war crime because, the only part that was a war crime was the second strike that killed shipwrecked men. It's like, well, that's not true because
Mhm.
the first strike was not legal either, right? We're not at any kind of declared war against whatever entity we think we're bombing. There is no credible self-defense argument, which is what the administration has made at times, that this was self-defense, and because if these people were carrying drugs and those drugs eventually made it to the United States and then people overdosed on them,
Mhm.
that's the threat of self-defense.
Mhm.
Uh, which, I think if you accept that logic, then I guess we should drone strike, Merck and big pharma facilities in the United States if we've decided that drone strikes are the only way that we can safely protect ourselves against drug
The
overdose.
Sackler family too.
Yes. So
Uh, Hold on, we're getting into Luigi Mangione territory now.
no. Well, I'm saying we should not be drone striking anybody in any country.
Okay, all
But
right.
so but the yeah, so the a lot of the argument about this is a little flawed. I think people who correctly have moral or legal objections because of the really like excessive brutality of that one double tap strike are missing that. Well, no, there's no reason to consider any of these strikes as legitimate. A lot of international law experts have just said, no, this is just murder, right? We're
Mhm.
found people and are killing them outside of any kind of framework of armed conflict. Yeah, if we were in a declared war, these would maybe be war crimes, but we're not. These are just guys in boats. In some cases, it appears they may have been drug traffickers, which still does not justify in any other context drone striking them. And in some cases, they look like they've been fishermen. And the so this is also a topic that we have covered a lot at work, and basically under under the larger, premise that this administration is testing out how it can use the military in unlawful ways, and particularly in ways that are going to lead back to um, domestic repression at the hands of the military. The you know our attention got drawn to this when we had the National Guard and active duty Marine deployment to Los Angeles over the summer. Um, but the exact same thing is at play with the boat strikes. It's okay.
Mhm.
They're trying to figure out, you know, ICE and Border Patrol are awful. It's not that many guys, right? We're talking in the tens of thousands collectively, maybe up to 100,000 combined. Right? Military plus the reserves, that's 2 million people, right?
Mhm.
So that's a incredible amount of scale if you're somebody who really wants to have authoritarian rule over the country. And so one test case was LA and then the subsequent guard deployments, but the in some ways more frightening one is these boat strikes where we basically now know they tried to see if they could get at least one element of the military to murder people, and they acquiesced. And with I'm not the first to make this point, but if we can get the commander of JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, to murder a guy we found in a boat in international waters, um, can we get him to do the same thing to somebody at the Mexican border who we say might
Right.
have drugs? And can you get him to do the same thing to somebody who's on U.S. soil? Which still sounds far-fetched, but if uh, the
Yeah, not
difference
that far-fetched anymore.
the difference between drone striking somebody on U.S. soil and drone striking somebody on a boat in the Caribbean is uh, the number of laws we want to ignore. It's not that reassuring. Like
No,
the guy who was willing to overlook and circumvent a bunch of laws to drone strike a fisherman in the Caribbean, we're counting on him to say, well, there's some laws I am going to take seriously, which I think, could be the case for many individuals, but uh, it's not something, unfortunately, that we can have blind faith in anymore.